No.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the 195th Governance and Risk Call here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I'm one of the governance facilitators. I go by Pros11 online. And I'm joined here by a bunch of awesome people who participate in the Maker ecosystem or are generally interested in our DAO and how it works. This is our weekly call where we go over governance and risk aspects of the protocol, give you an overview over what's going on and let people hop on the mic, ask questions, participate in the shaping and direction of the organization. So go over ground rule or two here before we get started. As you probably noticed, this meeting is being recorded. So hello if you're watching on YouTube. Let's try not to talk over one another. That'll be a bad experience both presently and for everyone watching afterwards. There are a couple of facilitation tools you can use that'll make my job a little easier in terms of hosting this meeting. If you would like to add something after the person who's speaking is done, you can always make use of the raised hand function. You'll find that under reactions in Zoom. If you're unable or otherwise unwilling to hop on the mic, you can always drop your comment in our chat. I'll be reading through those periodically and bringing them up when conversationally appropriate. But yeah, this is an open meeting, so we do really encourage you to take part, ask questions, give your opinion on things. But let's do it in a respectful manner and be mindful that there are a lot of people who might want to share their opinion as well. Cool, that's about all I can think of. Thomas, you want to go to the next slide? The agenda today, we'll start as usual with the governance roundup, going over votes, our maker and proposals, and what's happening on the forum. We then have one initiative update today, that will be the May financials. And our discussion will be around the Aave D3M response. Some of you around probably noticed we had an urgent executive yesterday for a change. So we'll be going over what that was, how that happened, and kind of discussing the risks associated with it. All right, well, let's hop into the governance roundup. So polls, you might have noticed there's a lot up for voting right now on the Maker portal. We'll take us to the next slide. Thanks, Thomas. We had 3 concluded weekly polls, all of which passed this week. First being deploy a trial permissionless open market operation that is using DSS Kiln. For those familiar, basically looking to kind of buy back Maker from the market. We have a management of the Velodrome airdrop and VE NFT, basically improving how the 𝘧𝘪𝘯𝘢 was set up for management and collection of fees. And then we have adding Rocket ETH as a new vault type. All those passed, they will have some various lag links in terms of the implementation, though we expect within the next 30 days, you should be seeing those coming out for an executive vote. We'll cover the ratification polls in the MIP segment, but a final reminder that there are 2 ongoing green light votes. Voting ends on Monday, so be sure to check those out if you haven't given your opinion yet. Cool, so if you're a savvy governance user, you might have noticed 2 ongoing polls I left out were the prioritization polls. We'll be giving a full forum post as well as kind of a more in-depth dive on how those are looking. But to give you a brief rundown, on the technical resource side, we have compound D3M being like the overwhelming first choice, collateral onboarding as well being in people's top 3, in addition to being one larger holder's first choice. Maker Teleport, that's our L2 work, is in the top 5 of all voters with over 1K MKR voting. And notably on the governance end, most voters ranked only a few options. So on the voting end, you were instructed to basically rank all the options you want to see considered for prioritization. So either voters aren't following that instruction or there's actually very few items they want to see the core units putting their focus to. So that's good feedback if you are one of those voters and you didn't mean to send that signal, maybe consider resubmitting your vote. But if you did, we are certainly noticing that. Take us to the next slide, Thomas, please. Excellent. We have the collateral class sentiment poll. That's the other ongoing one. As I mentioned, collateral onboarding was, kind of the second or third option, depending on how you want to look at the vote breakdown. So it is cool that we have these kind of nested polls so we can say, all right, well, MKR holders seem to want some collateral onboarding to be a focus. Well, what do they want that collateral onboarding to be? We're seeing overwhelming support for core crypto collateral, though a large large delegate as well as a few smallers have put peg stability solutions as their top choice. Broader market demand based solutions, these are kind of like D3Ms, also showing a lot of support around top holders. One interesting finding from this poll is that real world assets options, so both the arranger and just general, are kind of largely missing from a lot of the top holders' top 5 choices. So we only have about 2.1K MKR collectively with real world assets in their top 5. Again, we're seeing fewer options ranked. Granted, this poll has a few less options than the other, but again, kind of getting a signal, at least from voters, that they want to see a tighter prioritization. Like I said, look for a forum update later today. We'll actually have some data and some visualizations to give you there, but wanted to give a brief rundown during the vote segment on this call. Cool. Only other thing to note on votes is executive proposals. Yesterday, we had the urgent executive for unwinding the Aave D3M. Like I said, we'll be talking about that more later. And on next Wednesday's executive, it's going to be a pretty small one, just 2 core unit MKR transfers to take care of there. All right, that'll do it for my votes rundown. I will pass it over to 𝘱𝘳𝘪𝘴, who's doing today's MIPS update.
Thanks, Peyton. Hi, everyone. 𝘱𝘳𝘪𝘴 here this week with the MIPS update. So if you don't mind, let's get started. We'll begin with the ratification poll. So let's start and see how the votes are going this week. We have the 2 top-level MIPs, MIPS 74, which introduces permissionless open market operations. The leading option for this one is no. And the MIPS 75, which introduces task forces, whose aim is to coordinate high-level business decisions on behalf of MakerDAO. There's also been the first task force onboarding sub-proposal, MIPS 75 C3SP1, for the growth task force, which of course cannot be ratified unless the MIPS 75, the parent MIP, is ratified too. At the moment, the no option is leading with 75, and the leading option for the onboarding of the growth task force is reject. We have a 2 core unit budget, one for growth core unit and one for strategic finance core unit. I believe we've already talked in detail about this last week, so I'm going to go straight to breakdowns. In both cases, the business as usual option is leading, that is their existing budget and not the increased alternatives. Remember, both of these budgets have a 1-year duration. We also have 2 facilitator onboarding for existing core units, one for Psychonaut for the Immunify security core unit, which has a large amount of MKR in the abstain option, and one for Tadeo for the Data Insight core unit, which is going with the yes at the moment. The proposal set for onboarding the SES incubated lending oversight core unit led by Luca Pro, currently leading with no as the option. And last but not least, we have can you show the next slide, please? Thank you. We have the Makershire Special Purpose Fund with no as the leading option with just over 2K MKR. The amendment for MIPS 16 is going with 100% yes, and the budget amendment for the Keeper network is also going with 100% rate of approval. That's it for ratification polls. They will run for 11 more days until Monday 27th. Now let's do a quick refresh to the proposals in RFC, which are essentially the same as last week, I believe. We have the top level MIP, MIP 72, which authorizes 60s Capital as real world asset arranger for MakerDAO. Something you may have missed, an addendum to this MIP has been posted by the author of MIP 72, and I'll be sharing the link with you guys so you can check it out. I hope I can, because my PC is actually really slow right now. Sorry, guys. There you go if you want to check it out. Next, we have the GovAlpha facilitator onboarding. As you all probably know, Patrick J is aiming to become a GovAlpha facilitator. With Long for Wisdom having stepped down from the role, GovAlpha currently has only one facilitator. And finally, we have two amendments. One that amends the core unit offboarding process. There has been a Know Your MIP episode for it, so in case you want to go check it out. And we have the MIP4C2SP21, which amends MIP0 to introduce the notion of retrospection dates for MIPs. And that's about it. Thanks for having me. Sorry, my PC is super slow right now.
Yeah, didn't notice it at all. Appreciate it, Sebix. Awesome. That'll take us to forum updates, and I see Artem ready to give us the update on that.
Yep. Just posting the link really quick. All right. Well, happy Support Bounce Thursday to everyone. And welcome to the forum recap. We're going over top news, announcements, and discussions happening for the week of June 9th to June 15th. And we'll begin with announcements. And first up, the weekly decentralized voter committees will now be taking place at 7 p.m. UTC. And yesterday's call is now recorded and up on YouTube for anyone who wants to check it out. And tomorrow, Rune will present part 4 of his endgame plan focused on MetaDAOs. And the call will also be recorded and then later up on YouTube. So keep an eye out, and I'll also post it in the Discord chat. Next up, we have GovAlpha outlining why the Growth Task Force MIP was removed and replaced due to an error. In short, the proposal was posted as a standard ratification poll instead of a ranked choice IRV format, and the new vote will end at the original time, being Monday, June 27th at 1600 UTC. And GovAlpha will be updating how they review the new MIPs to avoid similar issues in the future. And next up, we have SES, who has developed a custom tool to improve core unit budget transparency. And the tool is intended to make it easy for core units and facilitators to ensure that API supplies and all kind of financial data is transparent in the whole organization and for the rest of the community. They also posted a video walkthrough of using the tool, which is helpful and pretty exciting. And their next goal is now to build a more user-friendly API for the dashboard. And moving on to our discussions. So we have had about a dozen or more discussions on the forum this past week, and of which a handful have informal polls. And so due to limited time, I'll just go over the informal poll discussions to help improve their visibility. And first up, we have recognized delegate 𝘰𝘰𝘳𝘰𝘳, who outlines the current state of MIP proposal timelines right now and submits a poll asking the community for opinions on adjusting these parameters. He argues that the 7-week period is a bit too long and inefficient, and instead suggests for a shorter, potentially more efficient timeline through an informal poll. It's June, like the month? Okay. Well, now I know. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, next up, we have Balloonist, and I hope I got that one right. But he's part of the incubation program, aiming to ramp up legal resiliency core unit. And he asks really, like, why do we vote by a show of hands rather than using a ballot? He discusses both the pros and cons of both of those, using a ballot and show of hands, and asks the community which of the two do we prefer. And next up, we have Prankster of New Silver submitting by asking the community to allow real-world finance to spend some time and resources to engage with New Silver, and a signal request for raising the debt ceiling for New Silver's vault to 100 to 150 million DAI will be submitted after. The post, this post offers details on the items that New Silver and Real World Finance would engage in, and asks whether Real World Finance should allocate time and resources for due diligence and legal for New Silver's upcoming debt ceiling signal request. And next up, we have GDIP, who posted an informal poll asking whether makers should fix the price of staked ETH to 1 ETH to help crypto traders avoid liquidation. And next up, we have our signal requests, and there were 2, but one is overridden. So there's no active signal request right now, but GovAlpha has submitted an urgent signal request asking whether the Aave D3M bar, being the target borrow rate, should be set to 0. This signal request was posted on June 14th and was up for 24 hours, successfully ending on June 15th and resulting with it to go on chain as an expedited executive vote, which has also successfully passed and will be executed tomorrow on June 17th at 2100 UTC. Now, the successful passing of the signal request overrides another signal request by El Progreso to set the Aave D3M depth ceiling to 0. But besides this, there are no other signal requests currently being active. And that's it. There's definitely a lot more stuff in the forum at a glance. Check it out. It has a 3-point summary, some more discussions, help wanted, and ongoing initiatives.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Artem. Always some jewels in the forum at a glance, so do make sure you're checking that out on the forum. All right, that should bring us to our initiative updates. And I believe we just have one, and that is the May financials. Could take a guess, but I'm at least sure it's someone from strategic finance who's going to be up and on the mic. Is that right?
Hello. Yep, that's right.
Adrian,
Want
of course.
to do the financials this month, Payne? You sure?
I could take a stab, but I think it'll be much more valuable if you guys lead it.
All right, if you say so.
Peyton can do them when the numbers go up, maybe. As long as the numbers are going down, I'll be in charge of talking through them. So just to walk through the financials, please familiarize yourself with this legal disclaimer regarding the content of the following presentation. On the next slide. So in this executive summary, hopefully we're summarizing some of the key changes for the month of May. The net story is that the results continue their compression amid broader market turmoil tied to the 𝘰𝘪𝘴 debacle in May. And this month, you can expect more of the same with Celsius and 3AC, creating even more turbulence. Monthly recurring revenue is down to 4.3 million DAI, about 10% down year on year. So about 50 million DAI on a next 12-month basis on the back of strong declines in the price of ETH and WBTC collateral. Monthly recurring income is down to 1 million DAI, so down 78% year on year. And just for context and references, approved operating expense budgets are about 50 million DAI, but based on actual reported spend on a mix of cash and accrual, the operating expense items are about 32 million DAI. In short, the overall lending business continues to be driven by the availability of collateral to draw debt from, which is tied to the price of ETH and the price of BTC, and to the price of ETH and to the price of BTC. In other words, Maker is basically a leverage multiplier protocol. So when things go up, Maker goes up very fast, and when things go down, Maker goes down very fast. Maker's strength and resilience is in being able to manage these transitions in a smooth way. But its downside is obviously that the operating expenses are based in a different currency than most of the revenues, in the sense that the DAI generated is tied to the price of a very volatile asset. But the net of it is that with about 100 million DAI in our surplus buffer at the moment, the runway for Maker is sufficiently long to weather a number of years. We will, however, propose at the end of this presentation a structured framework for extending that runway further and help rationalize operating expenses, adjust operating budgets to new market realities, and improve the resiliency of the protocol. So in the next slide, here you have an overview of the monthly results. So top to bottom on the page, we're walking through a net interest income of 4.3 million and net liquidation income of 4.2 million, which bring the overall protocol revenue to 8 million DAI. So this liquidation income is obviously very lumpy and very choppy and highly dependent on overall market conditions. Workforce expenses of about 3 million DAI, with the caveat that this is on-chain data, so may contain multiple months of built-up expenses in one single transaction. So one month may be higher, another month may be lower. In February, for example, in recent memory, we had a relatively low cash burn month, but this is usually because the expenses for February would have been preloaded. We track actual expenses separately, working hand in hand with the core units to understand what the quote unquote accrual basis spend is. And incredibly, we are still sustaining a 71% return on equity, which is quite shocking, actually. So next slide. In this reconciliation, what we're hoping to do is help people understand what the drivers are for the change in recurring net protocol income from one point in time to another. So on the left-hand side of the waterfalls, you see at the top, on the top of the screen, the ending balance, so April 2022, a recurring net protocol income, and the end of the 3-month ending Jan 2022 at the bottom. If you walk through each of the different steps, we try to isolate the different drivers. So the main drivers every single time, almost every single time, are the change in the ETH collateral, the change in the ETH price, change in the yield, and the same thing for WBTC. Particularly quarter on quarter, you can see a marked effect of what the impact of the decline in price has done to the overall lending business. So in order to drive higher revenues and higher profits, Maker basically needs to add more collateralize and use them. Quarter on quarter optimizations on Oracle gas costs and including a lower ETH price actually drove $1.4 million in improvements from Oracle utilization. So we can thank both the price of ETH and the Oracle's team for their work in reducing this expense. So on the next slide, we're showing what the monthly income statement is by breaking out the different revenue items and lumping in all of the core unit expenses into one line item at the bottom. And here you should be able to see the impact of the liquidity income in moments of high market turbulence, as well as the relative amount of net interest income in relation to prior months. So on the next slide, focusing on the lending business, obviously the core of Maker, there's essentially an ongoing slowdown in DeFi lending markets that's putting pressure on gross interest revenues. So on lending income of 4.3 million DAI, down 31% from last month, we see the distinction between the collateral types. And here we see that ETH and BTC are still driving the vast majority of our lending income. The return on assets is holding up reasonably well given the environment, but still under quite a lot of pressure, particularly when you look at it from a year ago perspective. So here, I think the key element to draw from is just our dependence on these two crypto assets and therefore, again, to their underlying price. On the next slide. So you may notice a theme with this month's results, but it does actually turn out that our revenues are very highly correlated to the price of the underlying assets. And what we're trying to do here is show an overview of the historical results of Maker over a longer time horizon and try and trace the performance of those revenues in relation to the price. In the full May financials, we have an additional slide, which is quite interesting to compare with, which shows the amount of collateral that's locked in the system, as well as the revenues that are generated from it. And what we find is that there's a reasonably large and consistent amount of ETH and WBTC collateral that's locked in. But ultimately, the amount of revenue growth that Maker can capture beyond the fluctuations in price are tied to the number of collateral types that we can attract and introduce at scale. And then on this, there's a side note that Maker rightly prides itself on conservatism, but is in fact, as you can see from these charts, a leverage multiplier protocol anchored on the overall crypto market cap. So here I'm going to hand over to Mark, who will take it through to the end.
Thank you, Adrian. The slides are on-chain ETH lending market share slide and measures ETH lending, the ETH lending market measured in ETH. It started to stabilize with ETH deposits increasing by about 200K in May versus last month. And though most of these deposits are likely to protect existing positions and not borrow new debt, it is encouraging to see rather than ETH continue to be withdrawn en masse, as we've kind of seen since November. ETH market share held steady at 43% in May, flat from April on a year-over-year basis. Market share decreased by 3%, with Aave being the primary beneficiary. Aave recently ended their liquidity mining incentive program, so it'll be quite interesting to see if there's any significant impact on market share. Compound continues to provide comp emissions to depositors and lenders. So if there's any indication of that liquidity mining program actually being effective, we should see it in the data in the next few months. Next slide, please. The on-chain WBTC lending market declined by about 2% from last month and was up 27% versus prior year. Maker's market share increased by 3% versus last month, with about 2,000 more WBTC deposited in the Maker protocol compared to April. Our WBTC deposits increased by 74% from last year, and our market share is flat from last year, despite that big growth. Next slide, please. So for those who attended the Decentralized Voter Committee meeting yesterday, one of the subjects that came up that's actually actionable in the near term is carrying out a budget reduction. We spoke briefly on this subject on Ryn's call and wanted to provide some additional context and a framework for how we're thinking the DAO should approach this. Step one in this process would be returning excess funds that have been drawn from the surplus buffer back to the surplus buffer in the DAO. I mentioned this on the QSR, but we have 16 million in DAI sitting in core unit wallets right now, and the burn rate's about $2.65 million of DAI a month. The next step is determining what we want to achieve with the budget reductions. We can either shoot for profitability, as Ryn seems to desire. We can target a break even, or we can set a fixed or moving cap based on our recurring revenue. All these have pros and cons and have different impacts on our long-term valuation profitability. And once we decide what our goal is, there's a few different options. Option A is a broad-based cut across the DAO with no layoffs. Kind of everyone kind of takes their piece of the pie and their cut. This would be probably around a 10% cost reduction. Option B is a more broad-based, deeper cut, targeting around 20% reduction in the burn rate and could involve layoffs. Number three is in my view, the best option, but is more complex and difficult to implement, is a targeted budget reduction based on individualized core unit performance and budget reviews executed by the delegates. This is more akin to what is performed in traditional corporate finance in many companies. And really this allows us to take the first step as a DAO to more reasonable capital allocations and targeted capital allocations decisions, rather than looking back at historical capital allocations and thinking they're still appropriate in the current market environment. So the timing for this, we can start posting signal requests to see what the DAO, what direction the DAO wants to take this. And kind of how we're thinking about it, we've been tracking operating expenses. Some core units report financials and operating expenses using the SES format. Others use their own different formats. But we basically leverage that data, hold meetings, and the delegates and maker holders would basically dictate how the budget cuts are made and how the capital is allocated. We also, welcome ideas from the community, and we have a bunch of other ideas on top of this to reduce the cash burn to extend our runway. And yeah, that's it for the presentation. To see Nadia has her hand up, so fire away.
Yeah, so actually, I was thinking about all the initiatives that Rune has on mind. One of these initiatives are like reducing budgets, and I think it's something that that we have to think all together about how to do it on the best possible way. So I really like this initiative Dennis and David are running about how to improve the way how we handle communications and our calls. So I would like to have like something similar, like maybe a small group where people from different core units and community and delegates and whoever who wants to collaborate can think about the different ways to solve this challenge or how to manage it. I think that going straight to the forum with signal requests and just asking for opinions, like for based on their past experience, it's complicated, like a lot of drama, a lot of people pointing fingers, a lot of conversations on the forum that probably are not productive. But if we have this small group of people thinking about proposing solutions with different perspectives, maybe that could work. And I think we should do that, not just for the reducing headcounts or cutting budgets initiative, but also for the other ones that Rune is proposing. I think we all agree on Rune's ideas. I think so. Maybe I will add another initiatives that are not on his plan, but that's my personal opinion. But at least I think we all kind of agree that we are on a bear market and we have to be more efficient with our budget. So probably a small group thinking about these solutions may work.
Appreciate it, Nadia. See Maker Man with his hand up, so go for it.
Hey, thanks, Peyton. So I just noted in chat, one of the things I've been trying to talk about is the numbers here. It looks like our real cash expenses to revenues are basically we're still net positive here, right? And so if you think that basically our net expenses are something more like 30 million a year, if we have cash revenues of even 20 million, we're sitting on 80 million in the surplus. So you kind of have 7 to 8 years worth of run, provided that doesn't decay. And so I really want to put this whole thing, I'm the one that stood up on budgets quite some time ago, right? I was just concerned that the asks were growing too fast relative to the revenue declines I was seeing, right? Now we have real numbers. We can look at this more carefully and should before we get all dramatic about what are we going to do? How are we going to cut? We just need to think about what we think our revenues are going to look like. We got some good revenue streams potentially coming online. And basically, our cash expenditures aren't that high. It's just CUs are holding on to a whole bunch of cash. So I really would like to look at this more carefully and not get dramatic about doing a head twist change, when in reality, we can really just smooth out the run here and not do anything dramatic.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts there, Maker Man. Seeing a few other conversations going in chat. Would welcome anyone if they want to hop on the mic and talk about them.
Yeah, and just to confirm what Maker Man said, we are about break even on a cash basis, assuming that a lot of these self-reported core unit expenses are accurate. I know it's a little difficult to see on chain because a lot of core units are requesting 3 months plus the runway and their initial draw from the surplus buffer, which kind of obfuscates the true cash burn of the protocol. So on that basis, we're about break even, losing about $1 million a year at the current recurring stability fee rate, which is not a terrible situation to be in, considering the carnage in the markets. I think we definitely should tighten the budgets a little bit, but we're not in a dire situation by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly there's risk if the markets continue to deteriorate further, but we should still have plenty of runway, assuming even if stability fee income goes down to the signal digits and millions in revenue. So yeah, I think the DAO is quite well positioned, especially relative to other projects in the space.
Seeing some good discussion, but do want to be mindful of our time as well. I might call for last thoughts on this topic here. Awesome, and we can always continue the conversation in the forums. That's a nice place for it. Has some longevity, whereas all of the people here and listening to this call recording will basically benefit from the information we're sharing now. All right, excellent. Well, not seeing any other hands raised or any other questions in the chat, so I think we'll go ahead and move on. I think that'll take us into our discussion segment, yes. All right, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about our Aave D3M response. Some of you are probably aware of the urgent signal that followed or preceded an urgent executive being passed yesterday. I could get myself straight, that'd be great. So I'm actually going to pass the mic over to Pramosh, who's going to talk a little bit about what the D3M risk was, kind of why he recommended the urgent signal take place, and we'll start off discussion now.
Yeah, so I can provide a bit of background on what would be next steps on our side. So 2 days ago, we posted urgent proposal to disable Aave D3M, and there were 3 things that made us decide on this. The first thing that happened, and everybody's aware of, is that Celsius became under stress earlier this week. And once we started digging into Aave's loan book, specifically into 𝘳 market, which D3M is exposed to, we realized that Celsius is actually the biggest borrower of 𝘳, which means we are, apart from our exposure to Celsius at Maker, we're exposed to them on the 𝘳 market, on the Ethereum 𝘳 market, on Aave. The second thing that made us a bit anxious is, of course, that they hold a lot of staked ETH. They're far the biggest staked ETH supplier to Aave, with about 400,000 ETH supplied. But they borrow stablecoins, which is different than the usual users who mostly supply staked ETH and borrow ETH. In Celsius' case, the situation is actually worse, because it's not only about staked ETH, the pegging and liquidity of it, but they are short stablecoin, which means they're also exposed to ETH price, which is in bear market right now. So all of this made us a bit anxious, let's say, but we weren't particularly convinced we want to push this proposal through. But then the third thing happened that actually made us decide on this, and this was the proposal on governance forums by Gauntlet, and they proposed to change 3 parameters, which kind of makes sense if you look from the perspective that they were mostly mitigating the risk of those positions who are long staked ETH and short ETH. But if you apply this to Celsius case, it was way too risky for us. There were three changes, and one of them was pretty much crucial, and where we just saw this is way too risky. They proposed to increase the liquidation threshold to 90%. In our terms, this means that you would decrease liquidation ratio for staked ETH to 110%. And this was just let's say this was too risky. You have Celsius, who's under stress. They're mostly collateralizing their stablecoin debt with staked ETH, which is totally illiquid, and you have 110% liquidation ratio. So this was where we made the decision to temporarily, I'm going to repeat again, temporarily disable D3M. There's the other part of the story why we felt this doesn't create any problems for us or for Aave in this case. The exposure of D3M was 50 million. We were earning basically 1.4% APY on this, which is quite low. So we didn't see like we're going to impact our revenues a lot with this, although that's definitely not in our domain. It's not how we, it was not the main trigger behind the decision. But definitely something we also looked at. And the second one was, if we do this, do we impose any additional stress to other markets? And we didn't, because the exposure was still pretty low. We didn't really affect the rates there after we after the vote passed yesterday, 50 million was withdrawn instantly, and the rates increased by 30 basis points, I think. So not a huge difference. We were also able to test the MOM contract, the instant unwinding, which is great. It worked well, as expected. So that's it. Next steps, we have monthly rates meeting, end of month, every month, end of month. And in about 2 weeks, a bit earlier, we're going to reassess the situation on our end and propose any further changes. What we'll be looking at is 3 things. First, the situation with Celsius, but now also with 𝘧𝘪𝘴's capital, because we saw, there's a huge contagion risk right now, and whales just keep on failing, it seems. But who knows who's next? And so we'll be looking at this. I'm pretty optimistic about this one. Currently, it seems they are protecting their positions. They unwinded both of them yesterday, not sufficiently. You can see they are still struggling with liquidity because they do small top-ups, basically, or repayments. But situation is improving. The second thing we're watching is, of course, staked it liquidity and staked it recursive positions, which are also improving. That's also good to know. And the third most important thing, of course, we'll be looking at their governance proposals. This proposal that went online, I think yesterday or was the day before, is currently not passing. So that's good news, but it's still live. So it can, in theory, still pass. We hope this proposal won't be live at any moment or similar one. And if there's a different one, we're going to evaluate it. So this would be the next steps, and I'll probably stop here for now.
Awesome. Appreciate the rundown, Pramesh. So I guess a couple of things to highlight there from it. Obviously, the changes have already been enacted. That's because the MOM setup for the D3M doesn't need to wait for our GSM delay, which is usually our 48-hour pause on any regular executive actions. This is like one of the safety measures of the protocol, one of the things that we can do to act quickly and respond to risks. So cool to see that in effect, as you mentioned. Other thing worth highlighting is that the Open Market Committee will be looking into these rates in a couple of weeks. Obviously, the regular governance processes are available to everyone, right? Anyone could write a signal to kind of undo what we just did with that executive vote if they think the risk has passed. But like the team has basically committed to looking into the issue and posting what they talk about for the Maker Open Market Committee parameter proposal group. A lot of words there, but the group of people that tend to look at our rates and basically periodic changes for our vault types. The only thing I really wanted to add is on the governance end, like this was kind of cool to see it all happen so quickly and effectively, right? We had an urgent signal process. So we had 24 hours, had over 70 voters from the forum on that signal, then put up an exec and had it executed pretty much instantly, within a couple hours, which was really great. Wanted to post the emergency response MIP here so you can see basically what the rules we have set up in place for when something is urgent or out of cycle. Kind of the important takeaway from there was this could have been an emergency, right, which would have been one level higher. But talking to the other mandated actors, everyone was okay with it being an urgent request, which is why we had that daily time before the exec went up. All right, that's more than enough blabbering for me. I see Chris with your hand up. Go ahead, take it away.
I just wanted to rattle the cage once more on the Aave topic. In addition to all the reasons we've been discussing for this response, the Oracle situation there is not something that we should ignore. It was mentioned in the initial risk assessment of Aave, but the fact of the matter is that Aave does rely entirely on Chainlink price feeds with no double check, no sanity check, no circuit breaker. and Chainlink's price fees are secured by 4 of 9 multi-sig. So there's a lot of risk that comes along with that I don't, looking back, I looked over the discussions, I don't feel like it was properly vetted. So I think we should take that into consideration when we're thinking about bringing the Aave D3M back. The compound D3M, on the other hand, compound does have a sanity check. They check against Uniswap V2, I believe, prices for all their markets. And if there's too much of a deviation from Chainlink, they hit a pause, an emergency pause. So they're already accounting for that. I just want us to keep that in mind when we think about bringing back the Aave D3M, and I'm kind of capitalizing on this staked ETH situation to just bring some awareness to it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that perspective. And yeah, as you mentioned, was one of the things mentioned in the risk assessment, but risk assessments are long and we don't always, talk about every part of it. So if people do have questions about the oracles, feel free to voice them.
A follow-up question for Primož. Might have missed, maybe he spoke about it, got a phone call, sorry. Any truth to, well, not any truth, but are you guys monitoring 3 Hours Capital? Heard it through the grapevines, there's possibly a liquidation at 993 ETH. I'm not sure if that's true. Regardless, just wondering if you guys were monitoring. And then the second part of my question is, when do you get, you Primož, as head of risk facilitator, when do you think you tell the MOMC team that you believe it's safe to turn it back on the D3 for Aave? Two-part question there, brother.
Yeah, so we are monitoring, of course, the 3 Hours Capital account. I monitored it the whole morning. Was it yesterday? I can't even follow the days now. And they literally were not like the Chainlink price feed. I think it means like a couple of dollars. Otherwise, they would get liquidated. It was really insane how close they were, and they didn't react. But after that, its price rebound, and they actually started repaying. So their health rate, was close to 1, like it was just barely above 1, and now it's at 1.14. So it improved. You can see they're improving their position, but with a minor repayments actually. So situation is getting better with both of them, but you can see they're still struggling with liquidity. So that's what we're going to be monitoring, in next couple of weeks. So that's definitely one input that we're going to use when deciding about it. But I'd say the most important one is also what's going to happen with staked ETH. Like I said, liquidity there, how the situation with Celsius actually evolves. You don't know. There was a letter of intent that Nexo might take them over. So it's really too early to say how it's going to look like in 2 weeks. Like maybe we're not even at the end yet. Maybe this contagion is bigger. We just need dust to settle, basically.
Definitely a lot of work for the risk department in a bear market. So thank you for good questions, Frank. Seen some side chat about like oracles as a service here. If anyone wanted to hop on the mic and talk about that, that's kind of fun. But yeah, also obviously would want to give priority to questions about the situation with Aave D3M. Yeah, particularly questions how we handled it, if there's things we think we can do better, that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. Your voice is valuable. I know there's like 50 of us on this call. And it can sometimes be hard to hop in, but really do appreciate everyone coming out for these discussions. Cool. I think that pretty much covers the topic as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, we did say we wanted to try to give some time back to everyone. I know it's been a pretty meaty heavy week. Might continue to be today for some of us. we'll get one last call if there are other topics people wanted addressed or any questions from today that
Hey,
went unanswered.
Sorry,
Yeah, go for it, Frank.
you know what I did think about, because I saw this through some of the TG chat rooms, and some of them were, of course, not happy that this was turned off, obviously. So I was wondering if anybody, and I guess I should be following the MakerDAO Twitter account. If what are we doing as far as like communicating out that this is just temporarily and it's nothing against Aave. You know, I think a lot of us are Aave token holders probably. So yeah, so kind of what are we doing as far as getting the word out there? This is temporarily for those folks that want to be knuckleheads and just, you know, blah, blah, blah.
I know Nadia had some thoughts about that on Tuesday's mandated actors meeting. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Nadia. Go for it.
Yes. Actually, when this poll went live, and Primož told us that he wanted to prevent a maker to be like more into the Celsius thing, we thought that it was a good idea to put the debt ceiling on 0, but at the same time, to prevent users to think that maker was not trusting on Aave, we decided to try to manage it through a Twitter thread explaining the reasons why we were doing this, that it was to reduce our exposure to Celsius and not because we were not trusting on Aave. So that was also the reason why in a couple of weeks we were going to see how the situation goes, and depending on that we could increase the debt ceiling again. So yes, that's on the communications plan. I have to check if the Twitter guy Tobal already posted that. I don't know, but that's on the plan.
Well, thanks, Nadia. Appreciate that.
And a good question, Frank. Yeah, definitely managing comms is a big part of these urgent situations. We were fortunate in that we do our mandated actors meetings on Tuesdays anyway, so we are already planning to convene. But if this had happened at a different time, we would have had to call a separate meeting to talk about what our response would be. That was a good clip, Chris, that how they can handle their own PR. Yeah. We obviously do work with them for a lot of things, so we want to keep that in mind. But yeah, bear markets do get pretty crazy. All right, final call then. Any other questions or items we wanted to address before we end today?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Brian.
Yeah, okay. I just want to point out from a technical perspective, the debt ceiling is unchanged. There should still be a debt ceiling outstanding on the Aave D3M. It's only the amount of DAI that get pushed into it by the D3M. So if the bar were to be reset to something, we wouldn't have to manage the debt ceiling unless we wanted to de-risk it a little bit from what it was before.
Yeah, that's a good point. We basically use that fail-safe mechanism. So whenever we set the bar to, when we change it again, it'll react according to that up until the DC, which I believe was 100 million. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure that's what it was when it was shut off. Cool. All right, well, thank you everyone for your time today. Nice having a lively discussion and a few topics from a lot of different people. We'll be back here next week. Is next week the late meeting? Someone real quick check me. No, we do have a Thursday after that. Okay, so same time, same place next week. On the 30th, we will be having a later GNR meeting again. Thanks everyone for coming.